Canelo. I guess it's official, or I guess according to sources, multiple sources, a fight between Saunders and Canelo Alvarez is done for May the 2nd. I guess it's still going to be in the United States, but I guess it's going to be the first time that's actually streamed by DAZN in the UK. I mean, it's basically what I said in previous videos. I said when it comes to Canelo, his whole plan, because I don't know if that money is necessarily guaranteed or not. I don't know what happens if he takes a loss. But his whole plan is, I'm going to fight the lowest level fighter that DAZN will okay. So I think DAZN still has to okay the fight, because he tried to fight Jaime Munguia and they were like, well, we'll give you $25 million for that one. And they wouldn't give him the full amount that he was that he usually gets paid. So I guess he can't necessarily, quote, just pick any opponent, so, but what he will do is he will pick the lowest level fighter that DAZN will say okay to, will allow. And I don't know, DAZN thinks, I don't know, when it comes, I guess they think when it comes to a fighter like a Billy Joe Saunders that, they can still do some numbers. They were going to be okay with him fighting, I forget his name, the Japanese guy. I think they'll be okay with him fighting a Smith even. Guys of that nature, they're okay with this. And they're also okay with him not fighting the levels of fighters like a Caleb Plant, of Benavidez, Charlo, Demetrius Andres, who signed to the DAZN. They're okay with him not fighting their 175-pound champion. My mind is blank today. I don't know why. Bevo. They're okay with, certain people that actually signed to DAZN that would be big fights for, but they're okay with him not fighting any of them. I guess their main focus is they want him to fight Gennady Golovkin so bad for some weird reason, to the point where they're actually willing to give him even more money. They're already overpaying him substantially because the viewerships aren't coming in like that. They're not getting subscriptions in like that. Yet, I guess I remember the head of DAZN, what he said was, they're looking at the long-term game. They're looking at the long-term game because he said he looked at PBC and he looked at what Al Heyman has done. So what he's going to do is like kind of what they did and look at the long-term when it's come to these particular fighters. But yeah, you just continue not understanding that you still have to put in compelling matchups. You still have to put them against guys that people want to see. You can't just continue putting them in there against low-tier fighters. Like, that's not going to, or guys coming off bad losses. That's not going to progress your brand. That's not gonna push you to the next level. Regardless, it's not going to. What pushed PBC was fights like Sean Porter versus Danny Garcia versus Keith Thurman. Keith Thurman versus Sean Porter. Like those type of fights, push PBC to the level where it was at. Like Earl Spence versus Sean Porter. What's his name? Like when Lara fought. When Lara fought Hurd, fights like that are actually what, pushed PBC to the next level. When Deontay Wilder's taking on or Ortiz, where, people can talk that BS all they want to. We know that Wilder can lose this particular fight. It's those type of fights that'll push things. Even a freaking Mares versus, Luis Santa Cruz or Santa Cruz versus a Frampton. That type of stuff. Those kind of compelling fights are what's going to go ahead and push you to that level. And they also became big just due to the fact that their biggest guy, even before quote PBC was made, your Canelo Alvarez, which was Floyd Mayweather, being in the biggest, most compelling fights. You know what I'm saying? And then fighting a Canelo Alvarez, fighting the likes of Ortiz. After he came off a great win over Alberto, where everybody's like, oh, Floyd doesn't want to fight a young, strong lion. He's not going to fight Ortiz. Is Manny Pacquiao going to fight Ortiz? Going ahead and fighting Cotto at 154 pounds when Cotto just got his belt back. And we all know that Cotto got cheated in his one major loss that he had. And it's questionable with the Manny Pacquiao loss because he might have been on stuff. You know what I'm saying? Stuff like that. Him taking on a Manny Pacquiao. Him taking on Oscar De La Hoya, just that was the guy that was the moving force. That was the foundation that was helping build this, build what became PBC. And then you have like the Amir Khans versus Danny Garcias, the Lucas Matisse versus Danny Garcias. These guys had compelling matchups even before PBC was formed. And they were able to progress, obviously. And they were on a net. Put themselves into a space where, on networks where people actually watched, though, but they were getting 1 million plus views. So every time these guys fight, 1 million plus people were watching them fight, or they would just end up fighting on Showtime. But especially when PBC was formed, Showtime went hard. They went ham when you're getting a Charlo versus what's his name against Erickson Lubin. You getting fights like that, You getting fights like that. The other Charlo versus J-Rock, where everybody's like, oh, Charlo's scared of J-Rock, he's scared of J-Rock. And then he fights him before he moves up. You had fights like that. And that's what propelled them to where they are right now. The main guy wasn't doing these type of fights. He wasn't these low-tier fights. Even when you're fighting champions and you're trying to catch them off their worst performances, that's the complete opposite of what the foundation of what created the other entity was doing. He was taking on guys coming off their biggest wins and taking on guys that were 15, 20 pounds bigger than him. Champions, pound for pound guys, Hall of Famers. That's what he was doing. That was the foundation. And all the other guys, they had their regular matches with, but they also had, tough matchups. They also had those tough matchups. There were compelling matchups that people were really hyped up about. When you got a Mikey Garcia versus an Adrian Broner. A fight that people have, Mikey Garcia versus an Easter. Manny Pacquiao versus Keith Thurman. You know what I'm saying? Wilder versus Tyson Fury. Like, these are big matches that they put in there. Big matches. That's what's propelled them. And then when you have, things like J-Rock versus Hurd happen, or you have a J-Rock versus, and it's whoever he fought in his last opponent that he lost to, those are all being watched by 1.5, 1.6, 1.7 million people, 2 million people. Charlo loses his belt to Harrison in front of 2.2 million people that watch that. Then you have the matchup, the rematch, where like almost 2 million people are watching, and again, the compelling matchup where people don't know who's gonna win. Your foundation doing this, fighting these lower tier fighters, or fighting guys coming off bad performances, where the public, and especially when it comes to the boxing fans, know there's way more compelling fights. And when they know that, hey, you're facing a Kovalev, but we all just saw what Beterbiev did. We know what Bivol can do. We're seeing those two guys, even the guy that Beterbiev lost to. We're seeing those as the 3 top guys in the weight class. But then this is the guy that you're choosing, who's been knocked out 2 out of his last 4 fights, and he's looking like he's about to get knocked out again this last fight, and then he's fighting again just in a couple of weeks later. And then now we've seen a Billy Joe Saunders have a horrible performances, and then now you want him to fight, Canelo Alvarez, supposed to be the foundation of this movement that you're supposed to be having. It's not going to work, and it can just because it's not going to work. And just having the names, him and Gennady Golovkin, Canelo versus Golovkin, just having those names it's not going to bring in what they think it's going to bring in. So they're going to pay Canelo all this additional money for no reason. They're not going to get returns off of this. But I don't blame Canelo. Just in case y'all wonder, I don't blame Canelo. The Zone is a top line hoe. She's on the block, and he's making a killing off that. That's just what it is. Like, subscribe, share. I'm out.